So I'm joined here with David Gaddess. David, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, thanks. Yourself?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for joining me. So, firstly, obviously, you are the host of the Heat Army podcast, and so tell me a little bit about how it started and when it started and what sort of inspired you to start in the first place.
It started about, I think the first incarnation was probably 2010, 2011. Started off with just a dictaphone and a cheap mic from the Poundland, and it wasn't very good. I was trying to get interviews in the stand and things like that, and then I wanted to make it more of a radio show because I had done community radio first, and that's how I fell into broadcasting and really enjoyed it. And then I just wanted to do it more about Gateshead. And we, as I say, I started doing it live on a thing called Ustream, which I think's been bought out by somebody else. And it was very similar to what I'm doing now, but a lot more basic. It was just a camera and audio. You couldn't play anything on it.
Yeah.
You couldn't play highlights or anything. So, and then I started getting guests that would come on that, and we'd talk, and the camera would just be facing at a Gateshead badge on a Gateshead shirt, and it was primitive, but we got listeners, and there was definitely a need. Well, I'm not gonna say a need for it, but there was people were willing to sit and listen, which was for okay, and that went on for about a year sporadically, and then eventually it turned into the Heat Army podcast live on Spreaker, which allowed us to really broadcast like a radio show live, whether online, of course, so people could listen on the phone on the go, or they could listen on the computer. And we've got really big listener figures, especially in the Wembley season. We were getting 300-400 listening live, obviously because of the hype at the time. And then it just went on from there, and it kind of slowed down a little bit after the Wembley season because you had such a high dropped,
Yeah.
and then takeovers, and then you had the infamous Joseph Calla thing, and you kind of lost a little bit of heart with that, because it was hard to do the show because it's more about promoting the club, and it was hard to promote the club when you had such a bad owner in situ. And but then obviously the club got took over by fans again and got a bit more vigor, and we've now got it to the point where we broadcast live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter all simultaneously, where it is more of like a TV show now. So, and we can play with highlights, interviews, have people live from around the world, which we've already done, which is fantastic, and it's just give us an opportunity to try and spread the word of Gateshead around the world, and hopefully entice more people down to the game.
Yeah, indeed. And so, obviously, as you mentioned, there you've been doing it for a while now. And so, what inspires you to keep doing it? What is about it that you enjoy the most?
I just like pushing the club. It's just that I'm obviously I'm disabled, so I couldn't play football. I can't even kick a ball because I would probably break my foot because they're that brittle, my feet. So my outlet is talking about the club and just trying to do my part to, hopefully get more people excited, and hopefully bums on seats. If one person comes along off the back of all of our shows, then it's been a success.
And so, looking at the football club as well, what is it about Gateshead that sort of drew you to support that perhaps over Newcastle or Sunderland, for example?
I wasn't really a football fan when I was younger. My dad wasn't a big football fan, so it was through a friend at school, John Young. He went to the Gateshead games, and then when I was about 15, I went to my first game with him, enjoyed it, and then there was a special offer on. I got a season ticket. I can't remember how much it was, and that they obviously had the season ticket and went and become hooked, even though we were god awful and got relegated and were cannon fodder that season. But ever since then, I've just loved supporting Gateshead, made a lot of friends, and it's just a little bit different to obviously Premier League football. There's not as much media coverage, hence why there's
Yeah.
start a podcast. But I think you see a truer representation of football because the players at Gateshead's level are playing to pay their wages, they pay their mortgage, pay the car off, and if they lose or don't have a great season, then it can financially affect them, and it just feels a bit more real life. And I think the players appreciate the fans more as well.
Yeah, and of course you do commentary as part of the Heat on Me podcast as well. So you do the official commentary for the club. And so when did that start? And also, what's it like in comparison to, say, doing just the podcast, for example?
It was very strange. I got asked to do it, or invited to do it, by Richard Bennett, the former Gateshead chairman, and because at the time, and we just spoke about this on the Heat Army podcast, that the Northeast coverage of non-league football is it's on its knees. The local television and radio do not have the finances to be able to do it. And there's a lot of teams to cover as well. So Northeast non-league football is really suffering at the moment for that. But in this day and age, anyone with a microphone and can put content out, and if it's done the right way, obviously clubs will appreciate that. And it's just nice to help out and do that. It is different. It's been a very big learning curve, but it's a hobby that keeps me busy. And as I say, I am disabled, so it really takes my mind off my legs as well. So it's a double-edged sword, really. It's something it helps me mentally as well.
Yeah, and I'm moving on to football. Of course, Gateshead are playing very well this season. We've only lost one game, of course. And so, how would you sum things up so far?
It's amazing. It's probably one of the most exciting seasons I'll start to a season I can ever remember. There's so much enthusiasm, there's so much hope, and there's so much talent on the pitch as well. And I think we've got more to come from the team. We've got players out injured that'll come back, and then there'll be like new signings. And it just seems that we are just flying at the moment. It's hard not to get too carried away. I'm trying to keep my feet on the ground and just think, let's get through the next game. And I think it's probably very similar to the management of the club. I think they only focus on one game at a time.
Yeah, and of course there are some tough tests coming up. Brackley, Curzon, Ashton, Fylde, for example, who are all up there mingling amongst Gateshead in the playoffs. And so, how do you see those games going? Do you think Gateshead have got what it takes to take a good amount of points from those games from teams around them?
Definitely. If they play to the standards of what they've set out so far this season, then we're more than a match for anybody in this league. But it doesn't always work out that way. It's a long season. Suspensions will happen, and the next 3 games is probably going to be one of the toughest tests. Definitely one of the toughest running of games I think we'll have all season. Of course, we're in Brackley, Fylde, and Curzon, Ashton, who are all up there. I think they're all the 3 teams above us. I think Curzon Ashton's just below.
Just below,
so
yeah.
We've got to really, go into those games and play our game and not worry about the other side. But if they can get something good this week, then we can be fully embed ourselves into the top 3 and build from there.
And looking at the FA Cup as well, of course, a great win on Tuesday night against Marsk, gets into the first round proper against Altrincham, of course, a National League side. And so, how would you sum up the importance of the FA Cup? Of course, the league, is a priority in terms of getting promoted, but for a non-league side like Gateshead, how would you sum up the importance of the FA Cup and progressing through the rounds?
I think it works on 2 fronts, financially and on hopefully getting the attention of the region. In the Northeast, you've got a lot of clubs that have done well in the FAFRs, and you get a lot of floating supporters will go along to support those teams in the later stages. It's not often you'll get a Northern League side touching 4 figures and into double figures in that term. The 3,000-4,000 turning up at a Northern League ground, and those are the fans that you want to try and attract, and of course also new people as well, people that lend the support from Newcastle, Sunderland. So to get into the first round of the FA Cup, and it's not the most glamorous of tie, and I'd imagine Altrincham will say the same thing, but it's a chance to get through, and both sides will be looking at it the same way. If you can get to the second round, you've got that financial aspect, and if you can add more money into the coffers for a club at our level, it can't be a bad thing.
Yeah, and now looking at the management, so Mike and Busted, you must agree that they've done a fantastic job so far.
Yeah, and you can definitely see the progression of the teams that they've built over the last 3 seasons, although obviously the first 2 seasons, the first season ended abruptly but got finished through the playoffs. Second season it got null and voided, unfortunately, due to the aspect. But you can see that they've kept a core of players that they've wanted to build around. It's a young side, bar the manager, of course. But it's a side that you can see that the footprint they've put down is starting to work. They're starting to be able to bring in players with the ethics and work rate that they want. And that is evident of what we've seen in this season so far. We've got players that play for each other. Like, one notable thing was Macaulay Langstaff chased the dead ball down to the corner. He could have carried on along the dead ball line himself and went for glory, but he laid it off, and it ended up in a goal for Gateshead. And I think it's that mentality that Mike Williamson, Liam Watson, and Lewis Story, of course, are really embedding in the players, and it's just paying off dividends at the moment.
Yeah, and finally, you mentioned Macaulay Langstaff there. Now, of course, he's been a standout player alongside Kedwin Scott, banging in the goals this season for fun, essentially. And of course, they're the standouts. But who else would you say has stood out in the squad this season? Because there has been so many great performances.
You can go right across the park. We knew when we got Robbie Tinkler back that we got a fantastic player, and he's always a 7.5 out of 10, if not higher. You've got Lewis Story, who's come in, who I've openly said I was underwhelmed when he signed. I've ate them words completely. He's an absolutely fantastic addition to the side, and of course you hear about his coaching abilities as well. And he's still only 27, 28. I think he turned 28 this week. And still got a lot of life in him as a defender, and it's just great to see him come in and playing well. But another player as well, who I was his first game was Owen Bailey at the beginning of the season. I thought he looked a little bit out of his depth, but then he's grown in stature, he's grown in confidence, and his ability is shining through. And in the last two FA Cup games, he's been an absolute marvel in midfield, along with Dan Ward, another player who stepped up this season. And you can go right through the squad, but those are the players that I would pick out so far.
And of course, just to wrap things up as well, you have got people from injury still to come back. You've got Danny Greenfield, for example, and Luke Williams. So this is a very good gated squad. And so once everyone's fully fit, do you think they can press on even further?
Well, you would hope that Danny Greenfield can get back to where he was last season, because of course he ended up, when the season ended, he went on trial at Sunderland for 2 weeks. So his performances last year didn't go unnoticed. So hopefully, honestly, he's broken metatarsal. You hope he can get back up to speed and back into the swing of things of where he was. So that'll be like a new signing, essentially, in midfield. And midfield's probably I'm not going to say our weakest place, but the place you would hope to have a bit more strength and depth. And that'll certainly happen when Danny Greenfield comes back. And Luke Williams, we're yet to see what he can do. He's played at a lot higher level, comes with a good caliber, and you'd hope that he can come in and add a little bit more to the attack and prowess, which is absolutely fantastic. And let's not forget Paul Blackett. He's scored from the bench as well a couple of times this season, and he looks very dangerous when he comes on. So everybody's hungry and everybody's dangerous.
Brilliant. That wraps things up. David, thank you very much for talking to me there.
No problem.